These words are from Rumi. No mirror ever became glass again. No bread ever became wheat. No ripened grape ever became sour fruit. Mature yourself and be secure from change for the worst. Become the light. Now, if you would all, in your program, the affirmation of faith, if you would follow with me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To serve in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into the harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
It's a very special privilege to have Reverend Dr. T.K. Barger as our speaker today. Reverend Barger is the senior minister of the First Unitarian Church of Toledo, Ohio. He grew up in Arkansas, and he is a graduate of Hendrix College. He and his wife, Jewel, are currently visiting family in the area, and he graciously agreed to speak at today's service. So Reverend TK, welcome back to Arkansas, and welcome to UCLR.
It's a joy to be here with so much energy, to have a recorder duo and percussion, to have a choir singing with piano and violin accompaniment, and me to come from a congregation that is in the midst of a long search for a music director. Brent James, we might be able to find a plane ticket. And to be in this beautiful refurbished sanctuary, and I've been lobbying for a capital campaign to do some sanctuary improvements in my congregation, and to have the special help of Sherman James. I'm very appreciative for that. Let me confess that I have envy today. And hello all. I'm pleased to finally be here preaching for the Little Rock Unitarian Universalists. I have known about this church from my time at Hendrix College in the late 1970s, when I would see the ads in the Arkansas Gazette and know there was a place for liberal religion in Central Arkansas. And technically at that time, as a college student, I was an Episcopalian, but chose deliberately not to attend church. And since I moved out of state soon after, I didn't actually get through your doors until 2010 or 2011, when I traveled to Arkansas to explore a possible chaplaincy job in Pine Bluff, which I chose not to accept. Some of you might know that I was on the schedule to preach here in 2020, but a pandemic intervened. So it's a special pleasure to be back at UUCLR in the pulpit this time, and with friends with Arkansas ties here. My friends Cindy and Don came from Russellville, and family. My sister Sam is here, as is my wife Jewel. I bring you greetings from Holy Toledo, where I'm the senior minister, and I'll be talking about change. Particularly relevant to your congregation, I come from a church that, in a way similar to your situation now, went through a time between called ministers from 2015 until early 2017, when there was no interim minister. The Toledo Unitarians chose to be lay-led while they determined needs and wants for their next minister, and I am that next minister, by the way, rediscovering some congregational leadership and being less dependent on a minister's guidance. The actions of importance were recognizing that transition is not the change itself, leading ourselves, which draws on the fact that we have the abilities and I hope the energies to make a congregation thrive, even if we don't have the ministerial leadership at the time, and shared ministry, taking on the inspiration that we Unitarian Universalists are all ministers, with just some of us in the pulpit. And shared ministry can help to address pastoral care needs, Sunday services, religious education, and possibly less inspiring aspects of front office work and committee meetings. Plus, remember that shared ministry really should include aspects of playtime too, such as concerts and game nights. That change around ministry might be the biggest change on your minds right now in the sanctuary, but we're all facing all kinds of change, aren't we? It's post-election, so you're seeing changes you wanted or very much didn't want in who will take office. The expected might be in some positions and the desired left in the desert. Some of you are asking, wouldn't it be nice at least for a time not to be the opposition? Societally, with struggles about racism and oppression and many cultures, and worth and dignity, perhaps especially with LGBTQ plus and people of color, how can we be welcoming, open, joyous about differences and finding how we might all be the same at some core level? Denominationally, we're facing change with a current discussion of revised Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes, values and inspirations, coming up for a bylaws revision vote, likely next year. And we're considering not just how our own words define us as a church, but if they speak not just to us, but to the generations coming up. And again, congregationally, there's some perhaps unwanted and unexpected, but also possibly awareness-raising change for your being without an interim minister to accompany you through this time of determination about directions of UUCLR. In our own lives, family and individually, change is ever there. And in our own circumstances, whether it's health, financial, relationship, or other related aspects, change is the norm. Isn't it the Greek philosopher Heraclitus who says change alone is unchanging? He's the one who also said you can't step into the same river twice. And that has a bit more change relevance when literal rivers of concern, the Arkansas and the Mississippi, are affected by droughts. Lyle Schiller wrote what's become a classic in the church change area, The Change Agent, 50 years ago. He detailed several types of change: modernization, transformation, and survival adaptation. But he also gives an even simpler typology, he said. He wrote, in one category are those changes I favor. In the second are those I oppose. Consider two of the ongoing statements on church growth that come from many congregants, not just from this church, I'm sure, because I haven't found a church yet that doesn't say this. We need more young people. We need more families. Yes, we all do. But there's no magic way to attract. Statistics show that church attendance is declining. I'm finding that with younger people, the notion of membership is a bit different. And being in church on Sunday and signing the membership book aren't necessary to be allied with a Unitarian Universalist congregation, even though that would help the established ways of church composition. And there's still general misunderstanding of what Unitarian Universalism is. And I hope I, as a minister, do at least a small part of showing that we're a world religions respecting place for people of faith and even of no beliefs, that we come together knowing that we don't all have the same spiritual path, but it's a joy to travel together when our paths meet and to support one another in seeking and sometimes finding and sharing stories along this journey. And in showing that we're attentive to this world that we know. And change must come here, not in an afterlife, if there even is one. William Bridges wrote in his book, Managing Transition, Making the Most of Change, changes cannot be delayed until everyone feels comfortable with them. An organization must be able to take changes from an initial idea to a full-scale implementation without all those little delays that used to give people time to adjust themselves and settle gradually into the new way of doing things. Change is the name of the game today. The way change was managed in the past was designed for a time when it was sufficient to get warm bodies on the production line. I would say that the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock is not an assembly line church. You don't just need bodies to fill roles. You want a membership of people living our liberal religion with all of its morals and values. Be aware that you can make some changes for that to happen well. And getting to that from we need more young people is why a congregation needs to do other things too, to attract new folks. Sharing meals, being social, providing some liberal religion-oriented education, and living our values in the world, not just individually, but as a congregation, which means supporting social justice in all its dimensions, including that Black Lives Matter. A woman has choice over her own body, and that includes abortion rights, and that two consenting adults who love each other can legally be married. We're in the world, not separating from it, focused a bit more on humans here than on notions of deity beyond. Back to William Bridges. He wrote, "It's not the changes that do you in, it's the transitions. They aren't the same thing. Change is situational. The move to a new site, even a change within the campus, as you did for this sanctuary and your religious education wing. The retirement of the founder, the reorganization of the roles on the team. Transition, on the other hand, is psychological. It is a process that people go through as they internalize and come to terms with the details of the new situation that the change brings about. I want you to think about transition as distinct from change. You're in transit now. This isn't yet the change, for Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock Ministry. Let's move to what you have to do at UUCLR without an interim minister escorting you through this time of transition and interchange, leading yourselves, leading ourselves. I'm saying our because even for this one part of a Sunday, I'm part of UUCLR. When leading ourselves, we help one another in times of comfort and in times of crisis. As a church, we do the traditional religious stuff like mark changes in life stages and promote ethics and morality in all that we do. But in leading ourselves, we also assist in living good lives in other ways, like reimagining what makes a family and having relatives by choice rather than or in addition to being kin by blood, like affirming what it means for a person to be whole and that gender and sexuality aren't the permanent factors and identifiers they once were thought to be, like working to change cultural thoughts about race so discrimination doesn't happen because of skin color or where people or their ancestors come from. We're leading ourselves sometimes by realizing we're going the wrong way and finding companions to go with us on the better path. And we're leading ourselves in the seemingly small ways, just being together because we like each other's companionship, sharing friendship. Sometimes that simplicity is the most important way for us to bond. People are social. The church is a common place for common good, and I'll bet UUCLR has that kind of common community. Remember that ourselves isn't just who is here now. It's the Unitarian Universalists of Central Arkansas, even if they don't yet know they're Unitarian Universalists. Bring people here. Ask your friends and neighbors to come with you or on their own to this place that you hold dear. I know that it can be hard to out yourself in some places as a religious person. Perhaps especially as a Unitarian Universalist, because many don't understand our inclusive approach of liberal religion, and you don't want it to be you evangelizing, but there are so many people who might be you if only they were exposed to it. And your bringing them here could mean more members. A statistic I saw from a Christian church growth resource set out the percentages of how people start attending church. 6% are by an organized visitation. 6% are invited by the pastor, and only 2% are from advertising. The category "a friend invited me" is 86%. It's through you, not a minister or your media, that your church will grow. And with all of that, you share. Shared ministry is becoming more prominent in Unitarian Universalist practice, in part because we realize more and more a minister can't do it all, and sometimes the best minister is the friend, not the designated leader. Some of you might know that shared ministry comes from a statement by Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams, taking the scriptural priesthood of all believers to another level, writing about the prophethood of all believers. And since his time, priesthood and prophethood have been merged and extended into shared ministry, with the recognition that, in a way special to Unitarian Universalism, because of our liberal theology and commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, along with other principles, all Unitarian Universalists are ministers. Others might still claim the concept of priesthood for all, but I think without the dedication we give to shared ministry. I'll expand on our Unitarian Universalist shared ministry in a minute, but first I want to quote what James Luther Adams wrote. A church that does not concern itself with the struggle in human history for human decency and justice, a church that does not attempt to interpret the signs of the times, is not a prophetic church. We have long held to the idea that all believers have direct access to the ultimate resources of the religious life, and that every believer has the responsibility of achieving an explicit faith for free persons. As an element of this radical laicism, we need also a firm belief in the prophethood of all believers. The prophetic liberal church is not a church in which the prophetic function is assigned merely to the few. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which persons think and work together to interpret the signs of the times in the light of their faith, to make explicit through discussion the epochal thinking that the times demand. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which all members share the common responsibility to attempt to foresee the consequences of human behavior, both individual and institutional, with the intention of making history in place of merely being pushed around by it. Only through the propheticism of all believers can we together foresee doom and mend our common ways. End quote. We Unitarian Universalists are open to all. We say, yes, we have ordained and fellowshipped ministers, but we also have all of you as ministers, not so formally recognized or trained, but important in our advancing our religious ways and cause. Be conscious of your own ministry and of your shared ministry. Consider serving on the board, on groups and circles and committees, and of using skills or developing new ones as a volunteer. For example, in the music program with your new music director, in religious education, or in tech. As a Unitarian Universalist, it's good for you to be in the community changing the world, but you're also needed here at your church home, helping UUCLR to thrive. Change. In my experience, it's not something we like, especially if it's imposed on us. And in a group setting, there's always going to be some imposing alongside your own notions of how change could come. It might be a bit better if it's our own idea, done at our own volition, but still, there are times we'll wonder why we decided to do it. But then, once the change begins to show good results, we might appreciate it and say it was a good idea. I hope your ideas are better than good. So be it.
us say in unison these closing words. They were provided to us by Reverend Barger. We send the flame from our chalice into the community with the hope that it helps us to ignite change, and that the change we seek within this congregation and in the world will build the beloved community. I invite Rusty back up to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen. Blessed be, and namaste. Please join us if you can for coffee and conversation in the Maida Wing following the service.